Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on this Friday live session. These sessions are all about being proactive and bringing and showcasing solutions, and that's the theme of all of these Fridays. I'm really excited about today's with AI. There's a lot of talk on LinkedIn about AI, and I find that a lot of people are talking from a sort of an academic level because not that many people have engaged with AI in any great way or to any great degree. So I really hope today we can start to showcase how AI is already changing lives, improving lives, helping staff. So I'm really excited about today's session. We're going to do a quick run round of introductions and then we'll get into the content and we'll break each use case and presentation up so that we can have conversations. And I'd really encourage people in LinkedIn to put comments into the LinkedIn comment section because we can see that on the stage and we'll thread those into our conversation, answer any questions and those sorts of things. So please do comment. It makes the whole session more interactive and engaging and more useful for everyone. So I'll kick off with a quick introduction. I'm Anthony Lawton, founder of Fit to Care and Insight Genie. I'm an advisor to organisations to help improve productivity, but also improve well-being at the same time. The big themes for me to do that are behaviour change science, systems thinking, and AI. So I'll now hand over to Angela.
Hi everyone, thanks Anthony. My name's Angela Bradbury. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Help First, which is a sort of AI for good startup. I met Anthony at a DigiLeaders event a few months ago, and I thought we had some things in common to talk about. My background is in casework organisations, AI safety and management consulting.
Brilliant. Over to Ali.
Thanks, Anthony. So I'm Ali Salomon, Head of Engineering for Caution Your Blast. We're a digital consultancy focusing on digital transformation and applied AI. And I've been in the sector for around, well, too long to say, maybe 20 years now. So yeah, look forward to showing you some of the stuff we've been working on during today's session.
Fantastic. And then Stu?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm Stu Pearson, Head of Innovation at Citizens of Ice Salt, which is part of the Citizens of Ice network. A bit like Ali, I've been around for too long, 20 years in the kind of non-profit digital space, and today going to talk about Caddy, which is an AI solution we developed locally, but we've been working with National Citizens of Ice in the Cabinet Office. Fantastic.
And then last but not least, Alex.
Yes, hi everyone, it's great to be here. Thanks Anthony for bringing us together. So I'm Alex Meierman, I'm an independent consultant. I specialise in helping social care authorities prevent people experiencing crisis. I believe proactively supporting people in need is both the right thing to do and saves public money. And I have seen how AI can really complement people to achieve more by creating capacity for more value-adding human work. I'm a chartered management consultant, 15 years across consultancy and in-house in the public and private sectors. And most recently was lead director at EY, Ernst & Young, up until Christmas.
Fantastic. So I hope everybody appreciates the talent on this session. I'm really looking forward to it. So I'll kick off with the slides then. And I think, are you going to go first, Angela?
I'm going to go first, yes. If you go to the next slide, please, to me. So yeah, hi everyone, my name's Angela. I'm from Help First, which is a mission-driven startup. We use artificial intelligence to support a service's kind of most vulnerable customers. We typically deploy large language models for charities and public services. If you could go to the next slide, please, Anthony. So a couple of years ago, we applied to solve this challenge. So if you're not aware of it, CivTech is a competition run by the Scottish Government every year. It's absolutely brilliant. It aims to get innovation into the public sector, and I think it does a really good job of that. So each year they publish a sort of series of challenges together with government departments and agencies. And we were lucky enough to win one of these awards, which gave us 18 months of runway to work on a critical problem. So this one came from Citizens Advice Scotland's Extra Help Unit. The EHU support people who are struggling with their energy bills. So imagine you're threatened with being cut off from your power supply, but your child is diabetic with insulin in the fridge, or maybe you need to run a dialysis machine or something like that. The EHU liaises with the energy suppliers to sort out system errors, give people friendly credit and get them back on supply. But with the cost of living crisis following COVID, they were really overwhelmed with demand. Next slide, please, Anthony. So we've spent lots of time talking to and observing EHU advisors in their roles. It's a stressful job. So you log in first thing in the morning and you see this kind of wall of text. No matter how good you are at remembering names and prioritizing your to-do list, people told us that the system felt quite overwhelming. One advisor called it name soup. And I think if you look at this screen, you can see why. So they spent lots of time having to read reams and reams of case notes, writing up summaries to email colleagues, email suppliers. They sort of lived in fear of someone slipping through the cracks and not being prioritized properly. Staff sometimes, unfortunately, burned out. So the turnover was higher than we would have liked. Next slide, please, Anthony. So this is what we came up with. We're calling it intelligent case notes. And we did it through lots of careful co-design, building a plugin to the CRM system that the EHU were already using. So that was Microsoft Dynamics 365. But the technology that we built is possible to plug that into any front end. So we worked really closely with the EHU advisors and their supervisors to understand how they triage cases in the first instance. And we built large language model technology that semi-automated that. We're also generating what we call risk alerts. So you can see that in the middle there. These are sort of visual representations of flags like medical conditions or equipment needs, young children, people of a pensionable age. So if you roll your mouse over one of those flags, you can see a summary of why it's present from the case notes. Supervisors also get a real-time dashboard that you can see on the right. This shows the kind of case mix per team member, so they can allocate new cases accordingly. Next slide, please, Anthony. One of the things we learned in this project is that it's hard to know whether the machine has done a good job because the humans sort of marking their work can disagree with each other. So instead, we focused on making experiences better, both for users of the technology and users of the service. So you can see the things that we focused on at the top. We were looking at improving safeguarding, client satisfaction, basically saving time for staff, how they experience their jobs, their well-being, making sure that they feel good to stay in the job, and trying to reduce bias as much as possible. It's interesting when you think about bias, because I think a lot of the time when we talk about AI, we're talking about the models being biased. But I think it's important to understand that in a lot of these services, it is possible for humans to be biased also. So a company policy might say something like, we wouldn't prioritize an elderly person over a young mum, but humans will always bring their personal experiences to that kind of thing. And sometimes they might end up doing those sorts of prioritizations regardless of what the company policy says. So it is possible that AI can reduce bias by kind of taking those personal sort of details out of the case and doing the prioritization based on other things. So that's kind of an interesting thing that we sort of learned going through the project. So anyway, you can see how the kind of progression in user feedback changed over the first 3 months that this was live. And yeah, by the time we got to July, it was a kind of a sea of green. So that was good, good feedback to see. Other things we learned along the way, machine learning is not exactly like software development that you might be more familiar with. I sometimes think of it like software development is like building a box where you kind of know what it's going to look like when you start, and you go through the steps to get there. Whereas machine learning is a bit more like growing a tree. Like you sort of know roughly what it's going to look like, but you don't know exactly what the branches are going to do. So you kind of have to experiment as you go along, see how it goes, have a rough idea of what you're hoping to achieve, and be really responsive to what you learn along the way. Next slide, please, Anthony. And finally, the outcomes. We're really proud of what we've been able to achieve. So we've managed to free up time for staff from reading long case notes and enabled them to spend more time talking to customers. They're now saying that Help First is helping them serve citizens better and keep them safe. They feel the work is more sustainable. We're getting particularly enthusiastic feedback from advisors who identify as neurodivergent. I think that's partly because of the risk alerts, the kind of visual representations. And we've been honoured to have had our work recognised. We've been either the winner or runner-up in quite a few awards that you can see at the bottom. And we're already deploying similar technology with other clients in casework scenarios with similar sorts of scales of benefits. So yeah, that's it. Do get in touch if you would like to chat about any of this after today, or if you've got a current challenge that you're struggling with, you can find us on LinkedIn. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. So we'll have a few questions between us, and we'll get back to we've got a few comments coming in from LinkedIn as well, which is great. I really love your point about bias, Angela, and actually we can I don't know who wants to go first in terms of addressing Jeanette's point, but it's a really good point, because I think most people on LinkedIn will go down the route of hallucinations and bias, and it feels like a big driver for them. But actually, as you start to work with it and understand how you can manage it and how you can control it, you can arguably make it safer than human interaction by the controls and the guardrails that we put in place. But I'll let you guys talk to Jeanette's point. The machine learning was really interested as well, but I'll let you guys take the floor so I don't waffle on too much.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Jeanette's point. Like, I think it's very important. In the way we did this project, so a lot of it was sitting with advisors and supervisors and understanding not just how they've prioritized things in the past, but how they think cases should be prioritized. So it wasn't just taking past behavior and replicating that in an AI system. It was being very conscious about what good prioritization looked like. So for instance, making sure that if a customer is off supply, as in they do not currently have any energy access in their home, that is the number one thing that we're looking at, which is, you know, there's no kind of demographic bias there.
Yeah, brilliant. I don't know if Ali, Stu or Alex want to just come in, but for me, the big point that we need to be impressing here is 15 minutes to 30 seconds. That is absolutely ginormous. The pressure that takes off the workforce is immense, because it means in those 30 seconds, it's not, the cognitive load is nowhere near as great. So you can concentrate on doing a decent job as opposed to trying to wade through pages and pages and pages, which is ridiculously difficult.
Yeah.
So I think everybody should really think about that 15 minutes to 30 seconds is huge.
Yeah, absolutely, Anthony. And I'd like to just add as well, with the Help First solutions, there's like the human in the loop, there's a common pattern, right? So although it's identifying these kind of vulnerabilities, there's always somebody, a caseworker, for example, who's going to be reviewing them. So that process efficiency is going to have a massive impact, but there's always a human accountable. So I think that's and as a general kind of approach, it's good, particularly as we companies and departments are applying AI. It's a recommended kind of, or one pattern you can take to reduce the risk of the AI going haywire, for example.
Should I just speak to the other questions that are coming through? I think they are.
Yeah, I think the data protection one's going to be a big one that we'll all agree with. So
yeah. So with this one, we took a sort of belt and braces approach. So all data was pseudonymized before we worked with it at all. So there was no kind of sensitive data that that were seen by our team at all. So that stayed within the EHU. And then when we were kind of working with the data, we did it all in their systems. So we were never kind of taking data out of their Azure instance and piping it anywhere else. It was, we were working within their environment already. So yeah, we didn't have to store it anywhere else.
Okay, brilliant. Super. Any other points in those questions that have come up?
Yeah, we didn't have to make any process changes. So I think that's one of the beauties of large language models. It is possible to kind of work with very unstructured data, information that comes in natural language. You can work with that. So yeah, thankfully we didn't need to get the EHU to work in a different way at all. We could just kind of plug into that. And yes, we've got feedback mechanisms in place. And maybe it's important to note that the triaging, it's only a first pass. We're not kind of saying this is definitively how the cases should be prioritized. It's more a sort of indication, so that when something comes in, you can think of it like, do I need to down tools and look at this straight away? Or is it that I can sort of carry on working as I normally would do? And yeah, there's the prioritization is always kind of checked by a human.
Fantastic. Shall we move on to the next presenter?
Sounds good.
We'll have time at the end as well to go through more questions. So keep the questions coming, guys. It's really appreciated.
Thanks, Anthony. So obviously I'm going to be following on from Andrew again. It's a kind of citizens' advice, so there'll be some commonalities, and it's how we've used AI to address a different pain point we've got within the service. So if you move on to the next slide, Anthony. So the kind of problem statement we were looking at is the way the citizens' advice process works. You know, if we offer free advice to people who need it, and if a client comes with an issue maybe the advisor is unsure of, they will ask for either second opinion or a bit more support from a trained supervisor. And how they would do that is using a kind of shared chat space where they'll drop the question in there and a supervisor will help them. What we found over the last 2 years is one, we've had recruitment challenges. So the cost of living crisis has made it hard to recruit trained advisors. So we've got a lot of trainees, which is great. Obviously, new people into the organisation. But it has led to obviously an increasing demand. The other thing we've noticed is with the cost of living crisis, there's clearly been an increase in people asking for advice, but the complexity of their issues has massively increased as well, which has made it even more demanding for advisors. So there's more and more questions going into those supervisor chat spaces. And the result of that has been that there's been a longer delay getting that response back to the advisor, which means getting that answer back to the client. So we were looking at how we could use AI, generative AI in particular. Could we use AI to kind of address this kind of pain point? So we developed in-house, working with our advisors, a Gen AI kind of supervisor chatbot. And since the end of 2023 and most of last year, we were working with the Cabinet Office's Incubator for AI team. And we're building what is like an expanded version of that prototype that's now called Caddy. Move on to the next slide. So what is Caddy? So Caddy is a generative AI LLM powered bot. One of the things I think, as Anthony alluded to, is hallucinations. Obviously, the service we provide, we can't get it wrong when we're giving help to people. So what we want to do is mitigate the risk of any kind of hallucinations. So we used RAG, retrieval augmented generation, to restrict the information sources that Caddy would go to for answers. So it only goes to, at the moment, the gov.uk website, which is the government's information website, and Citizens Advice's own public site. So when Caddy is asked a question, it will only go to those two spaces for an answer. The ambition was obviously that it would speed up the process. So rather than waiting for a supervisor to see the question, go away, research the question and type an answer, Caddy would go away in a matter of seconds, go through both those information sources and get an answer back to the advisor. The other thing is it will build advisor confidence. As I've already kind of said, we've got a lot of trainee advisors now, and what you want to do is kind of build their confidence. So getting those answers back as quickly as possible. But the key was to kind of reduce the demands on supervisors, which was becoming quite intense, and obviously getting the answer back to clients as quickly as possible. As I've said, the demand on advice has never been as high as it has with the cost of living crisis. One of the first things we did before even a line of code was written, and I think Andrew alluded to this, was to sit down with our advisors and supervisors and speak to them and say, this is our idea, this is what we're thinking, this is the pain point we're trying to address. What we're not doing is make any attempts to replace the amazing work our advisors do. I think, again, Andrew will probably concur, advice is extremely complex. And the idea that you're going to wave a magic wand and an AI chatbot is going to solve that, we're a long way away from that. And the other thing we were really conscious of is clients who approach us are often very vulnerable. They're often in distress. What we didn't want is to put them into any kind of chatbot loop of hell. We wanted to make sure that they get to speak to a person. So the clients will only ever speak to a human advisor. What I'll do now, the next slide, is kind of talk through the CADI process. So how it works. So a client will be speaking with an advisor. In this instance, the advisor is unsure about their issue, or maybe they want a second opinion. So what they'll do is they'll drop that question into the chat space and ask CADI, I've got a client with this issue. Could you give me a bit of help, please? CADI will then go away, reference, as I've said, only advisor now, which is the citizens advice space, gov.uk. What it does then is it doesn't present the answer back to the advisor, it presents it back to the supervisor first, because what we don't want is a temptation for the advisor just to take that answer and give it straight back to the client without human validation. So it goes to the supervisor will then kind of give it a thumbs up, yeah, that's right, or maybe add some additional information, maybe there was some local information that CADI didn't know about. Once it approves it, though, it then pushes that answer back to the advisor. So if we go on the next slide. So the validated response then goes straight back to the advisor. So the advisor then knows this has been validated by a human. Obviously, that's important for a number of reasons. As Ali mentioned, that human in loop process at the moment is so important with AI solutions. From a citizens advice point of view, it also makes sure we're compliant with insurance. So even though AI has assisted this advice, it is a human advisor who's validated the advice. So if it was wrong, it would be the human advisor who was wrong rather than the AI. Then the advisor can pass that information back on to the client. Go to the next slide. So last year we did a pilot with 6 local citizens advice using CADI. What we wanted to do was measure the accuracy of the responses, the impact on the time, returning those results. Importantly, again, going back to Angela's point, getting the feedback from the advisors. Obviously, if it doesn't work for them, it doesn't work for us. You know, are they happy with it? And the evaluation was done independently by the government's in-house team. So I think, so what the evaluation was really kind of validated that we were definitely onto something, and that's why the work continues. So the efficiency, so from CADI getting the question, going away, getting the answer and getting the answer validated was around 4 minutes. That was compared to around 9 minutes for a human supervisor to do. So even though that doesn't sound a lot, 5 minutes, when you think we get hundreds of thousands of calls on our advice line, that means we're going to be helping a lot more people because we're speeding up that process. The accuracy of the answers, even in this very early stage, is 80% of the answers CADIs are returning required no intervention by the supervisor, just validation. That 80%, the 20% is mostly either because at the moment, because we're using RAG, we've restricted it to 2 information sources. Some of the answers required information that fell outside those information sources. So higher level specialist advice. So we know if we were to add those sources, we would increase accuracy. The other was around improving the questions that were being asked by advisors. So if advisors were asking a very generic question, CADI would provide an answer, but it would require obviously a lot more input from the supervisor. Feedback from advisors has been extremely positive. So rather than advisors being scared this is going to replace them, they've just become up suggestions. Oh, could we have this feature? Could we have that feature? Could we have this? So they're really excited about the possibilities. And with trainees, we definitely see an improvement in confidence from advisors. I think then if we just move on to kind of, just before that, so next steps. We're going to add some additional features. So we're going to have the ability to self-approve. So experienced advisors are saying, well, actually, could I use this as basically super search, but I will validate it myself, so approvals. And the other one is getting Caddy to ask follow-up questions before it goes away for answers. So again, to improve the accuracy, when the advisor asks the question, Caddy's going to ask, well, could you tell me this, this, and this before I go away and get the answer? And the Cabinet Office's Incubator for AI team are actually looking at how they could use Caddy within some of their teams. So maybe the DWP or other organisations could benefit from using the same kind of methodology. Thanks.
Brilliant stuff. Really, really good. I'll just bring up the questions that we haven't addressed yet, Stu, if that's all right in a second. I just reflect on that AI almost being a mirror. So if you put a very shallow question into it, you're going to get quite a shallow response out of it. And that is really the essence of great design, isn't it? But also engaging and training users to be aware of the right prompts, prompt engineering and that sort of thing. Yeah, really important stuff, but fantastic. And again, we're looking at over doubling our productivity, aren't we? And I'm really pleased to see that accuracy level. And there's reasons why that can be improved further, but that 80-20 rule is really kicking in. So the first one I think was this one from Jeanette.
So we're working with the Cabinet Office. Caddy is kind of open source, and there is a commitment to algorithmic transparency with government projects. So there will be, once Caddy's freely available, there will be kind of transparency records about kind of what systems have been used.
Okay, great stuff. The next one, we're moving into ethical concerns.
So obviously, citizens advice, it's not really healthcare environment, it's more legal advice. In terms of ethical concerns, we're really conscious, obviously, that Caddy is there to augment the process and not replace the process. So the humans are still the key drivers in it.
Yeah, and I think that ties back to Angela's points as well, doesn't it? I believe it could absolutely be used in healthcare with these same safeguards and checks and guide rails. Next one is from James.
So we're currently using Anthropic Claude as the LLM that's powering it.
Great stuff. And have you done any, just out of interest, Stu, have you done any testing with different LLMs? Yeah, and Claude was just better for that particular set of knowledge bases.
Yeah, that's been. We initially the original prototype was using OpenAI's API, but then it looks like the preference really seems to be Claude is the stronger one at the moment for this use case.
Yeah, but that's changing all the time, isn't it? Just got to keep abreast of that. Next one from Beth.
Yes, there is definitely. So again, going back to that 80%. So at the moment, Caddy seems to be really good at, without getting into kind of inside baseball, kind of level 1, 2 advice. So kind of lower complexity, more general issues. When you get to the specialist advice, particularly around kind of benefits issues, unless we were to add more information sources in at the moment, Caddy's not doing great in that area. So the aspiration is obviously to add those additional inputs in.
Yeah, and I guess you might change the language model at that point as well, with the more complexity in terms of almost the algorithms to work things out.
Yeah.
Another quick one. They're flying through now. Thanks everybody in the audience.
So it is just at the moment, it is just RAG, but we are looking to implement Knowledge RAG as part of the version 2.
Yeah, brilliant. I've been studying this as well with Amazon Web Services. I don't know if you guys have looked into that, but they've got a lot of exciting things on the horizon. Maybe we do another one of these for that.
Yeah, I mean, we use Amazon AWS, and there's lots of capabilities, lots of tools that they provide, but in the wider ecosystem as well. I mean, there's just, I think 2025 is going to be a year where we see a lot of tooling for people to utilize and play around with and ultimately integrate into their workflows for sure.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Just on that, sorry, I think it's just the confusing terminology of co-pilot. So we didn't use co-pilot. It was just the idea was it's like acting as a co-pilot for advisors.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay then, so if we're not careful, we'll run out of time. So I'll move us on to the next slide, and we can pull up any other questions that come through at the next one, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. So today I'm going to talk about a service that Caution Your Blast built for the Foreign Office and Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office to help British nationals receive answers to their inquiries in times of crisis when they're abroad, and to help the FCDO Consular Contact Centre scale up more effectively during those peak periods. Next slide, please.
Sorry, there we go.
That's okay. So I guess, what are consular inquiries? Well, when you're abroad, you may be faced with all sorts of situations where you might need the help of the UK government as a British national. Things like natural disasters, lost passports, and you need to get home, medical assistance, and legal help. They provide a consular contact center to answer these types of inquiries, and people using it will often be in very vulnerable situations, in hospital, assaults, wrongly jailed, or even human trafficking and child abduction cases as well. So this service has a massive impact on people's lives. And next slide, please, Anthony. Okay. So each year, the Foreign Office process 500,000 inquiries, and 100,000 of them are written inquiries. And each one of those needs a person to respond to it, which is time-consuming and expensive. During times of crisis and peak events like holidays, written inquiries can take up to 10 days for a response. We can see in the news that global crises are only increasing as the years go by, so demand is only going to go one way. And next slide, please. So after analyzing the written inquiries, 65% of them were signposting activities, directing people to advice or the relevant page to fill out an application form. This in its own right presented an opportunity to drastically improve the approach to processing these inquiries. So what if we could use the natural language capabilities of AI and large language models in particular to provide a level of service similar to those one-to-one interactions that the contact center were providing? If we could do this, then we'd create a win-win situation. Users, on the one hand, would get answers to their inquiries much sooner in their time of need. And on the other hand, volumes of inquiries that need to be handled by the contact center staff would reduce, and they'd have more capacity to handle those one-to-one inquiries for vulnerable people as the inquiries spike during those peak events. And next slide, please.
Ali, just to jump in, I'm guessing as well, as well as the signposting to the appropriate form, you can actually talk them through and help them, understand how the form should be completed. I don't know if that's the next phase, but that's definitely doable, isn't it?
That would be an application that you could apply. It wasn't done in this case, but yeah, for sure, absolutely. And I see there's opportunities like that throughout, lots of government departments as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we were going to use AI, this kind of is a related point to what you mentioned, then we needed to be sure that we were doing it for the right reasons and we weren't going to cause any unintended side effects. So this was particularly prevalent after some of the known horror stories that were emerging at the time we started the project. So genuine claimants having their benefits stopped after being incorrectly profiled as fraudsters by a self-learning algorithm. That was the case in Amsterdam, in Holland, and where a chatbot gave incorrect advice and had to honor a discount. That was an impact on the company. So we gathered a broad range of stakeholders to give us an informed, broad views, and we performed a consequence scanning workshop at different points in the project. And this allowed us to be aware of the intended and unintended consequences of using AI to respond to the consular inquiries, and we could then design mitigating factors around them. Next slide, please, Anthony. So the interface and interaction design was a new area with emerging but not yet settled patterns to call on. So we had to come up with some novel ways, and we used a lot of direct user research to inform our decisions. Initial findings were very informative, but it was also relieving to validate our approach to this design challenge. Users expected AI to be everywhere already, with their often negative experiences of chatbots and the like. I'm sure we've all had them. But the biggest problem was giving users confidence in the responses with during the research, we received comments such as, "Oh, would you look at that? He got it right." So it just reinforces that close matching suggestions help users feel listened to. And the research also revealed that users thought that responses would take days to come back. So we changed that with content on the tool. And we also learned about users' perceptions of AI, where people tended to write more formally, like to a person, sometimes even starting with "Dear Sir" or "Madam." So next slide, please. Sorry, Anthony.
I still like being polite to the even though it's AI.
I know. I do too. It must be in my nature or something. But for this use case, we were bound by an important constraint. So we had to ensure that inquiry responses were provided to users, that they were always 100% accurate, and they never deviated from the FCDO approved content. So as we all know, we've mentioned on this call, LLMs have a tendency to sometimes respond with inaccurate information known as hallucinations. And therefore, we couldn't just put a wrapper on top of ChatGPT and offload all that work to ChatGPT. We had to think differently. So we focused on a highly defensive design that would never put users at risk of producing inaccurate responses. We integrated it into their existing workflow by simply adding a link to the contact section of every embassy page. As 65% of the inquiries were signposting activities, we provided a triage service to the most common queries on the front page to save people having to submit an inquiry. But we always ensure that people in an emergency can access the phone number. It's really, really important. Again, these are often very vulnerable people in dire situations. And for anything else, they could submit an inquiry through. And this is where the AI come in. So similar to Stu, we used a RAG pattern, retrieval augmented generation. And we first identify all the questions within the inquiry. There may be multiple things within an inquiry. And then we try to answer each of those questions. And but it's important to know, LLMs, they don't just generate text, they can also understand it as well. They understand the language. So we use this to our advantage, but we had to gag the AI. The service doesn't respond with any generated text. Instead, we provide the content and the ID from a short list of potentially matching records from an FCDO content library. We provide that to the AI, and we ask it to pick the right one that matches the question, returning just the ID back. And then we retrieve the content, matching the ID from the database, and then that is returned to the user. And even if users did feel they didn't get the right answer, they can still escalate to the contact center and have their inquiry answered by a human. So this approach means that we don't expose the user to false information by hallucinations, and the user always receives 100% accurate FCDO approved advice. And last slide, please, Anthony. So the impact has been really pleasing to see, validating our initial expectations as well. So we rolled it out to 215 countries in the summer of 24. The FCDO have seen a reduction in 80% of written inquiries. And this means that they can scale up more effectively, and it's reduced their mundane workloads. So there's improved staff satisfaction. They're able to focus now more on those vulnerable cases, and they also feel they're having more of an impact on people. And users of the service now receive answers in seconds, regardless of the demand. So what next, you might ask? So we're working with another department with a similar problem. They also need to provide 100% accurate information at all times, and people have trouble finding that information. And we also see this exemplar case of applying AI to a live public service relevant to regulated sectors where there's zero risk appetite for incorrect information, such as insurance and law, but also throughout wider public sector as well, including health. And we recently got awarded a place on the Digital Capabilities for Health 2 framework. So we've got a real opportunity to help in the health sector as well over the next 2 to 3 years. So I guess with that, if you'd like to know more, chats, AI in general, feel free to connect and drop me a line. It'd be great to speak. And we also post blogs on our Caution Your Blast LinkedIn profile and run a AI in Government meetups event where we share insights and tips with the wider community at our office in Shoreditch in London. So we'd love to see you in person there too as well. So yeah, back to you.
Yeah, fantastic. Again, that 80% number is unbelievable. Fantastic. I think that insight into we can system design this so that we can guarantee 100% accuracy is a message that does need to go out, that most people sort of aren't close enough to understand that it's possible to do these things. I will just, at that point, Ali, as well, just a note to everyone. I will share everybody's contact details. I'm going to do a newsletter at the end of the month. So I'll make sure that everybody's contact details from this session is there, and we'll do a little summary of today's session as well for that newsletter. So please join my newsletter if you want that update. So shall we just kick off with these quick questions for Ellie, and then we'll move over to Alex. I think we've probably addressed this one, but
yeah, I mean, I think it depends on your use case as well and the criticality. So we worked very, very closely with the contact centers to basically create an evaluation data set of questions and answers so that we could benchmark the system against that. We were reaching levels of I think it was between 83 to 85% accuracy typically on those responses, but actually in practice, of the cases, because of the way the system was designed with the triage service as well, doing a lot of the heavy lifting, the cases that did come through, at some initial review, it was in the region of like 95% of those were actually, spot on. They were just looking for a bit of reassurance. So, and they, the responses from the contact center were actually, what the AI gave the user in the first place on the first pass. So, I don't think to answer this question directly, I don't think there's actually a single number. That it depends on your use case and the criticality of the service, the impact the service could have.
Brilliant. And then just one more question before we move on to Alex.
Is Caddy? Oh, that's a Caddy one, I think. Is Caddy being used to increase quality of advice, speeding? Yeah. I presume that's for Stu, is it? Yes,
I think it will be.
Yeah. So we're looking at. We've got obviously back on the back end analytics looking at the responses Caddy gives the users, and we're using it as a training tool really to identify training needs for individuals.
Fantastic. Okay, over to Alex.
Yeah, thank you everyone, and great presentation so far. I've got the opportunity of closing out the conversation. So, and as a consultant, I've had the privilege of working with national, local, and providers, mainly in the social care space, but all across the public sector. And there's three messages that I wanted to sort of add to this conversation and to leave you with. The first is really that, in my observation, AI is not new, but access to it and the opportunities are new. Secondly, that there are real opportunities for organisations, whether that's authorities, providers, others, the front line, and also for people to do what they do today faster, better, maybe more efficiently, but also to again looking forward and thinking about how we could do things differently and add greater value. And I think Angela's point around humans bringing the personal experiences and associated bias is a really important point there as well. And then the third message I'll leave you with is around leveraging AI safely and effectively is actually not that different to any change, and it requires disciplined delivery to do that. So if you can move on to the first slide, Anthony, if you're driving. Thank you. So in terms of AI is not new. There's kind of 4 categories of where we are in 2017, the generative AI birth, if you like. So there are many use cases across many routine processes. And what is really different today is AI being able to generate the insight and using its analysis and learning to help. And as we've seen, it's not perfect. It doesn't help in 100% of cases, and hallucinations and things like that, and bias needs to be looked into, but it is getting better. So this is not new. This is enhancement and development of something that's been around for a long time. We move on to the next slide, Anthony. Please, thank you. There are real opportunities for AI right now across standard public sector processes. And some of those elements or tasks within those processes are more readily available than others. And the chart there is trying to show just really typical processes and subtasks within those around kind of an initial inquiry, planning and response to that inquiry, and then delivering an answer or a service on the back of that, and the typical tasks and typical things that take place within there. But AI has got real applicability now across many of those processes. In some cases, things can be done better than they have been done previously, and in other cases, it's around being able to do things differently and add more value. So if we jump onto the next slide, please, Anthony. I'm so optimistic for the application of AI, and I do think Copilot's a really good way actually of describing what the experience needs to be. And the reason for that is the challenges and benefits of AI are really quite, or the opportunities are spread between organisation level, the workforce and the staff in often really difficult and challenging situations trying to provide a great service, and the people or the end user or the customer of those services. I'm sure in some of the bullets that I put on the slide there is people on this call will recognise some of those challenges that are on there around the allocation of funding, around the burden of administration, and around people actually needing help and information and guidance to move forward. And those benefits on the right-hand side are probably things we've been trying to tackle for quite a long time as well. And there's probably lots of different projects that are underway of doing that. So, and they're probably trying to do that with or without AI. In terms of trying to summarise those few things up, some of the top use cases that I'm seeing across the public sector in this, the ability to automate applications, the ability to be able to begin to predict and or prioritise high-risk cases, some real use cases around better, more streamlined fraud detection as well. The opportunity to extend self-serve. I think the 80% number came up twice in the presentations, which as a consultant, I love that because that is Pareto, 80-20 rule. It's great that the data showing that coming out in terms of its applicability as well. But also from a social care perspective, the ability to be able to better tailor and to better personalise answers by having created that capacity, I think is really important as well. So what I was going to do is just briefly touch on 3 examples, one from an authority organisation level, one from frontline and one from people. So Anthony, if you move on to the next slide, again, here's 8 use cases. I'm going to focus on one. I'm going to focus on number 6 actually on there. So number 6, the ability to improve real-time use of available resources. I've seen this with multiple city councils and other places, but where there are so many different services and so many different available organisations or groups and things out there that AI has really helped to bring the availability of those services, to be proactive in offering some of those solutions when putting together care packages or support packages alongside your more typical domiciliary care and support and hours like that. Being able to use the real time and availability and suggestions of different services has been making a difference with a city council up in the northwest that we've worked on. Because of time, we'll move on to the next slide, which will look at a frontline example. And I was going to focus on number one, actually, on this, around the intelligent documentation roles. So, and again, talking on the social care angle, a research commissioned by the Social Care Institute for Excellence basically says that a social worker spends 1 day out of their 5 days a week with an individual requiring support during an assessment. They then spend exactly the same amount of time typing up and administering the information that's come from that conversation. The ability for AI to sit alongside, to type up, to help to fill in the right information and ask the right questions has made a really big difference to a county council who I supported in the middle of the country recently as well. And the majority of the case notes that were filled in did not require further tailoring or editing afterwards. They were an accurate representation back. Not always, but it massively reduced the time of entry of that data. And if you move on to the third slide, which is my penultimate slide and talks about opportunities for people, here's a bunch of examples for there. But on the third angle there, around actually from an end user potentially approaching the public sector for services when they haven't done so before, actually helping to make it so much more readily available. What information is it that they need to see? What are the services that are available to them? What is it that they are likely to be eligible for, either for funding or that is there to be accessible for? In one city in this country, there are 114 different offerings and service offerings available to vulnerable and older people. How do you navigate through that? How do you get to a list that is appropriate to yourself? AI has made a massive impact navigating through the directory of different opportunities. So what I'll try to do there is show a bunch of use cases. My last slide, if we can move on, is just to give a quick view of some of the barriers and potential ways to overcome those. We won't go through each of those points on there, but the sort of challenges that I've seen and I've heard people say against the reasons to not deploy AI or why AI is not ready to go. They're really quite similar to lots of other previous or historic change and transformation type pieces. And I actually think the response is quite similar to lots of those as well. The one point I will draw out at the bottom is, and it's come up in some of the questions, around regulatory, legal and ethical uncertainty. There is so much work going on by different public sector bodies and different local authorities and dare say hospital trusts and others to try to determine what is the ethical use, what is the policy, what is the safe use for AI. My suggestion, encouragement for people on this call is, if you've got one, if you've created one, share it. Let's not create that in social care 153 times for local authorities with responsibility for social care in England. Let's do that right once, let's share that, and then let's move on to how do we create capacity for people to add value. The last message that I'll leave you is around disciplined delivery. How do you set up for change to go down? Well, discover, develop, design, and then deliver and go through a proof of concept approach. That is how to introduce AI, and that's what many of our speakers have talked about today in some of how AI has been introduced in their cases. I'll leave it with there. My contact details are on the slide. I'd love to help any organisation out there who is considering how AI could help support their service delivery moving forward. Back to you, Anthony.
Yeah, fantastic. Really, really great food for thought. Could I just ask you a question, Alex? Your experience with the IG governance teams that you've dealt with so far, I guess this is open to everybody as well, is how's your experience been with those teams in terms of their views on AI and how risk averse they are? Mine's been positive, but it's still been hard work, I guess would be my summary.
Yeah, and only point I'd add to that, positive, hard work, and also varied. And I think that it's definitely down to the appetite and down to the maturity of understanding, to be blunt, actually, of the different information governance or data security teams within that. I think when you look at some of the results and look at the improvement in accuracy and time taken, as long as the right controls are thought from a process person, right? As long as the right controls and processes are set up in place, AI is not actually that different from having handwritten notes, notebooks and things like that. It is a different way of progressing that. That's not to belittle it, but the only point I'd add, Anthony, is it does vary between every organisation I've worked for.
Yeah, and hopefully the more people become familiar with it, the more education there is with these sorts of sessions, people will start to look into it more.
But I think the key, as you said there, Alex, is having the right controls in place. And I think if people are nervous or skeptical, they've got a right to be. You know, that history has shown that when there are powerful tools that are developed, they tend to be in the hands of people who are already more powerful. And I think Jeanette's got a really good question in the chat that I'd like to address. So how can individuals like me ensure they have a voice and a seat at the table? It's a really good question, and there's no easy answer. There are, I don't know your situation, Jeanette, but there are things you can do if you want to kind of be on the kind of the side of the doing the machine learning. Harriet Owen in our team is a machine learning engineer, but she came from a casework background. So she was a caseworker for about 10 years before deciding to retrain. And she did that through going through what's called the Machine Learning Institute, which is a really great organization. They basically help people thinking about a career transition into machine learning. So that's one route. I'd also encourage you to write to your MP if you have questions, concerns, an opinion that you want to be heard. But ultimately, the responsibility is on the organisations who are doing this kind of work to make sure that they're doing user-centred design, that they're engaging with the communities that are going to be most affected, and doing that with a really diverse range of voices. So, yeah, I kind of feel like your question sort of implies that you should be the one doing the work. I actually believe that you shouldn't have to do the work in order to be heard. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. So it's a really good point.
Yeah, the only point I'll just build on that ever so briefly, Jen, I love the question. I think the idea of co-production, exactly as Angela said, of service design and solution design or change design has to be with the people who it's done for in every single situation. I mean, again, back to disciplined delivery of change, you're absolutely right that needs to be considered. And I think the point one of the speakers made earlier around it doesn't work for every situation. This isn't the right answer for all uses. I've seen AI actually adding real value for people who, with accessibility challenges, actually helping to simplify information and promote it earlier. But it won't work in all situations. So you need to recognise we need to create the capacity amongst the human staff to be able to do the things where it does require a more complicated answer or the human touch.
Yeah. Could I just also piggyback off Angela's point? Because Jeanette's question also caught my eye as well. It's not necessarily just builders of AI where you can have an impact. Essentially, it's going to have so many productivity benefits in organizations across the board. I think what you can be doing within your own organizations, whatever they may be, is, if you're interested in this and you want to direct the way your companies are using it, is be the center of excellence in your company, be the go-to person, and set up governance practices as well. Training for organizations, it's a given. Everyone needs to be upskilled to know how to best use these tools and capabilities, but also you need to be responsible when you are using it. So you need to put effective governance around it to make sure that you're not going to give away sensitive company information or patient or client information. You are ethically applying this technology. So I just like to add that everyone can have an impact. It's not just the builders as well, it's the users too.
I just wanted to talk about a great example. So Manchester City Council have worked with Manchester Met University to create an AI People's Panel, which is just regular people. They've had some crash course training from Manchester Met, and the idea is that if the local government or any companies locally wanted to do an AI solution, they would present to the AI People's Panel to get their insights and maybe kind of think about things maybe they'd not thought of from a resident point of view. So I think it's a great example. It'd be good to see and kind of other organisations kind of following that to ensure, like Jeanette said, that people have a voice in this huge transformation.
Can I just add, I don't know if you've spotted any more questions we want to look at. We're getting close to the end, but can I just jump in on this Jeanette's question as well? This essentially is my raison d'etre at the moment with AI and the tool that I've built, Insight Genie. So the diverse perspectives are essential is absolute for me. So my view and awareness and experience is far too many decisions get made by senior board members that are too removed from the front line and from the work. And if we can get everybody, all the key stakeholders, their views into play, and then feed that through to the key decision makers, then we will be dramatically more productive and efficient and effective. And that's really my big bag as well. So if anybody wants to utilize that tool, then please reach out, because that's my big flavor. Any other questions we want to just pull out?
Just one from Sue. How can we arrange for individuals to come to trusts and support them? Get in touch, Sue. We'd love to chat. See what we can do.
Yeah, brilliant. And again, this video is going to be available on my profile. It'll stay there, and we'll do some updates, and I'll do the newsletter updates for everybody, contact details and some slides and things. I suspect if people want to reach out and have specific questions, we could well do some more of these in the future, because it's ever changing. Every single week it's changing, isn't it? So it'd be good to maybe do some more of these if the panel members are up for it.
Absolutely. We won't leave you with a silence.
Yeah, that's nice. Thanks, Ellie. So there's just one last question.
I was just reading through to see the question. I broadly agree.
Me too.
Yeah, and I think that just to build on the point that you've made there, I think there's been some examples within, not too far away from you guys actually, with Norfolk Council from again a social care example, not the work that I was part of actually, but on their journey towards AI and using predictive analytics to help with falls prevention. The first win that project has spoken about has been actually getting the data organized and ready for it to be accessed and used through AI. Actually then really created a greater opportunity to interrogate, use and draw insight and conclusions. And that achieved huge outcomes for the authority and for individuals as well. The opportunity then to do things better, differently, has come afterwards. So I think, yes, I agree with your point.
Yeah, I agree with the silo point as well. That could be another session all on its own, couldn't it? But I hope everybody's really enjoyed this session. I have. I feel like I understand what everybody's doing a lot more now. Really hope to stay in touch with these guys and work with them in the future. Please do contact me if you want more of these sessions with specific questions to be answered, and we'll do our best. And it will be saved on my profile, this video, so please share it with any other interested parties. And thanks everybody so much for making this session happen. I really enjoyed it. Hope it's been useful for everyone.
Thanks for having us, Anthony.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.